I have a weird problem with money. I'm good at saving it. I'm really good at investing it, but I'm actually really bad at spending it. And even if I can afford something, there's always a part of me thinking, instead of buying that, you could invest this instead. Or I question, do you really need to spend this, or would it be better off putting it in the market? And that's especially true when it comes to big things like vacations or bigger purchases that would kind of give me that experience over just put it in the market. It'll make you more money in the long run. So I actually, the last few months, I've been putting money into a sinking fund, and weirdly enough, it's helped me give myself permission to actually spend some of the money I work for and not just hoard it all and don't spend it, don't experience new things, don't go on trips or vacations. So that's honestly what tonight's video is about. So to kind of dig a little deeper into that, throughout this video, I wanted to talk about, why I started a sinking fund, how I am currently using it and how I plan on using it in the future for like bigger trips or vacations, and why I think being good with money also means learning how to enjoy some of it, even though it's difficult, especially at the beginning, while you're kind of retraining your mind to, hey, you work for this money, like enjoy some of it. Don't go crazy on a $10,000 vacation if your personal finances aren't in like that goal range or in a range you feel comfortable doing that. But be easy on yourself, because hey, we're not promised tomorrow. You may not wake up tomorrow, and then there you go. All that money is left over, and it served you no purpose. So, with that being said, I'm gonna quit rambling for now, and we're gonna jump into it. When I started my like personal finance journey a few years ago, or I guess I can say, when I really started taking it seriously, I was always asking myself, even with little purchases, I'm a little better now at it, but any sort of money I would spend, whether it's dinner with the boys, drinks with a girl on a date, I always had that in the back of my mind thinking, could this money be invested instead? What would this $50 look like in 30 years? I know to some people that sounds like a crazy mindset, but I've never met people who are equally like, hey, I'm going to invest and I'm also going to spend money at the same time. You're either on the side, hey, I can't save to, save my life, or you're on the complete opposite spectrum and I save so much, I'm afraid to spend the money. That's where I'm at. I'm definitely closer to that other spectrum where I'm just so hard on myself if I want to spend any little bit of money. Like I said, slowly working on it, but I mean, it's definitely a challenge for me, over these last couple of years since I've really started taking, my personal finances seriously. And the same thing goes for seeing a big cost pop up, seeing vacation or going on trips. I've had a few buddies, these last couple months saying, hey, yeah, man, we need to go on a cruise, let's go on a cruise. We'll have a good time. And always in the back of my head, I was thinking, dude, a cruise is probably going to cost me a couple $100 or maybe even $1,000 or $2,000 easily. Like, no way. Like, could you imagine what $2,000 in the S&P 500 would get me over the years? Like, I just thought to myself, there's no freaking way I'm doing that. So, I always kind of was like, yeah, totally, we can do that. And then I would just kind of drop the subject there. I definitely wouldn't bring it back up. But like I said, these last couple months, I've really forced myself to create a sinking fund, and to, I guess, quickly define that for anyone who's not too sure what a sinking fund is. I would consider it like, hey, you have your emergency fund of $1,000 or $5,000, $10,000, whatever your emergency fund is sitting at currently. And that money is, as the name suggests, strictly for emergencies. So, hey, like your car breaks down, you have a major house repair that needs to be fixed, you lose your job. But I would separate the sinking fund in a separate little bucket from your emergency fund. And that you could put, $50, $100. I'm currently putting $200 a month away towards that sinking fund. That sinking fund is strictly for me to spend. So if I want to go on a cruise that costs $1,000, I'm going to have to continue to put away $200 every month till I hit that $1,000 goal. And with that, I'm hoping, mentally, I'm like, well, hey, I've continued to invest all those months. I've just put a little bit of extra money away or to the side for me to enjoy personally. And with that, that'd be that $1,000 cruise for me. So when I give that $1,000 out of that sinking fund, I'm hoping I shouldn't beat myself up over it, because I'm like, hey, you've been investing. This is just a little side thing you put to yourself. Enjoy it. Here's $1,000. Like I said, enjoy it. Don't stress about it. And then when the trip's over, you start the next month, start putting those $200 again back into that sinking fund to build it back up for another future trip or a vacation or a new experience that I haven't experienced yet. So, I think the whole thing with this sinking fund, for me at least, is to prevent myself from feeling guilty buying something I want or something I want to experience that I know I can comfortably afford, but it just gets you out of that mindset where, hey, you're taking money out of your investments and you're pissing it away on a trip or on a vacation. What are you doing? That your future self would be angry at you. But I think it's quite the contrary. I think your future self would be happy that you took a little bit of that money, although you continue to invest, take a little bit of the money off the side. And treat yourself. You work hard. You go to work. You pay your bills. You take care of your family. Whatever it is. You hold a job. You should be able to reward yourself here and there when it makes sense. Obviously, if you're still building up an emergency fund, don't go take a $2,000 vacation. Although you might be able to convince yourself, oh, I really need this vacation. But I would say get your finances down, or like in a pretty solid position where, you have your emergency fund, you started investing a little bit, and you're able to put $50, $100, whatever the amount is, into that sinking fund on a monthly basis. So when you get to a certain goal number that you can take a trip on, you won't feel as guilty for doing it. At least that's my mentality with all this. It can completely backfire. So, when it comes to me pulling that money out of the sinking fund, maybe I'll make a video on it. And I think the really important thing here is, having not so much two separate accounts, but I would almost call it just buckets where, hey, you have your savings account. That's typically your emergency fund and like a high yield savings account. That is money I don't want to touch. You don't want to touch in case of, an emergency. But you can also have that sinking fund on the side, and that kind of separates the two accounts. I'm hoping it at least gives me the mentality of, hey, this sinking fund that I set up is the money I am expected to eventually spend on myself or paying for, a family member's trip or whatever the case is. It's being able to separate, the psychological distinction between the two, I feel is huge in my application to it. Maybe some people are able to easily, oh yeah, that's right, I put $1,000 in my emergency fund for that sinking fund, so I just know to take the $1,000 out. They don't need to see it in two separate accounts. I think it'll work easier for me, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. But to each their own. I would say play with it a little bit, or see what your different bank or your high yield savings account company offers. They could offer two different buckets you could put your money into, and it lets me enjoy things without screwing up my bigger goals. I think that is the biggest hurdle that I need to convince myself to, get over. I'm effectively saying, I already decided how much I'm going to invest monthly. I look to invest at least $2,000 a month. And after I've hit that goal, if I have a little bit left over, I can put that towards that sinking fund. So I've already paid myself, when it comes to investing or my personal finances for the future. But now I'm intentionally setting aside just a little bit of money. It's not a lot, to just enjoy for myself, to treat myself. And, if I end up treating myself to a $200 day trip, hey, there goes this month's sinking fund. It's over with, I spent it. Now, next month, I'm going to continue to build on it every $200. Or, if I want to save it up, maybe I need $1,500, instead of randomly taking $1,500 from my checking account or selling, $1,500 worth of the S&P 500 in my investment portfolio, I'll have the money on a separate fund. So I keep harping on the sinking fund. That's mostly what this video is about, but I think it is a good solution for the people who are too stingy to spend money when it comes to spending it on themselves. And I think the biggest takeaway that I'm trying to convince myself, and hopefully I'm doing a decent job at convincing you guys, if you're really hard stuck with spending money on yourself, being financially responsible shouldn't mean never enjoying your money. And I'm slowly trying to convince myself that I'm not as bad as I used to be when it came to, oh yeah, I want to buy, YouTube Premium for $18 a month. Oh, there's no way. Could you imagine what that $18 could do in the market? I've slowly, worked on, little monetary values like that. Or, oh, hey, if I go out for dinner, I don't really so much look at, oh, there goes $30 out of my bank account, or there goes $30 on my credit card, or, oh, I bought drinks, I went out on a date. I don't really look at those numbers as much, but now is, I guess the final test when it comes to, oh, you're about to drop $1,000 on a cruise, or you're about to drop $1,500 on a trip you've never been. So that's definitely the next challenge. Like I said, I'll definitely make a video on that when the time comes. So if that interests you, feel free to like the video, subscribe, and stay tuned. But I'd finish here by saying, saving money is a tool, not the end goal. Just like me, I think you also want to build wealth. You want to set yourself up for the future. You want to set your loved ones and your family up for the future. You want financial security. I think anyone who's watching this channel can probably agree with that statement. But, part of the reason you want those things is to eventually have the freedom to use your money. But it's kind of like a catch-22, at least in my case, and maybe a lot of people who watch this video, in becoming financially secure, but at the same time, you're being stingy, or you're afraid to spend anything because you think, oh, I might not have enough when it comes to retirement age. Oh, I'm just not going to spend any money. I want to make sure I have it. I don't know the statistic. I may put it up on the screen if I find it, but I don't want to guess the percentage. But I've heard a lot of people end up dying with a lot of money left in their investment portfolio, their savings, whatever avenue that you have your money stored. A lot of people end up dying with a lot of money saved over. They just didn't spend it because they were afraid to. So I really want to train myself now, before I get older, towards retirement age, to, hey, enjoy your money, be smart about it, make sure the calculations make sense, make sure the numbers, kind of add up. But ultimately, at least for me, I still think I'm probably always going to be naturally stingy with my money, especially when it comes to spending it on myself. I am always probably going to look at something and think, well, how much of this could turn into investments later on. But I really think the sinking fund will help me, and hopefully, can give some of the guys out there who are kind of in a similar boat a way to, kind of force themselves to spend money. I think it gives, me a solid middle ground. I can keep investing toward my future while also setting aside money that I'm actually, allowed to enjoy for myself in today's time. That is it for tonight's video. Definitely a rambler, but I hope, maybe I struck a nerve in some people, or the people who are trying to, maybe get to a similar situation where, hey, they're working on building their emergency fund. They're working on slowly investing on a month-to-month basis. And then, hey, maybe they get a little bit of playroom where they can put $50 or $100 toward a sinking fund. And then eventually, take that trip they've always wanted to, or, take their wife to that city she's always wanted to visit, or whatever the case is. The world is your oyster, guys. So I'm wrapping it up here. I appreciate everybody tuning in. And as always, guys, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.